Hello, my pals. Terrific daf today. Oh, wait a minute. Have I made a mistake? Wait a second. Is the description on there? Okay, good. It says defining an ignoramus, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, terrific page today. Today we're going to learn what is an ignoramus in the eyes of the sages. This is not a simple question. Who is with us? Who's tuning in? We want to see in the comments where you're tuning in from, what's going on with you, signaling to Facebook with our conversation starting technique that something of value is happening here, and that way more people will be given the opportunity to see it. Susan Bell says, hey Sal, no blockages. So glad to hear that you are on the mend, Susan. James says Indianapolis is in the house, and Rick has Chicago in the house. Terrific. Keep them coming, even if you're watching later, keep them coming. I'm going to get right into it because I have to get to a minyan for afternoon davening. And as we'll see toward the end of today's daf, getting to a minyan on time is an incredibly important spiritual practice. All right, let's get started. We are on daf 47. Right over here, daf 47, Mem Zion. In Berachos, we have started our discussion of the grace after the meals. What are its requirements? How many people need to join in? When do we say it? Etc. Because we've been talking about when there's a large group of people, who gets invited to recite, to lead the people assembled in the grace after the meal, we started discussing prominence, right? Who is the most prominent person in the room? And so now we get into a discussion of how do we decide that one person is more prominent than another? And if we accept that one is more prominent than the other, what do we do about it, right? So we have a little story that Ravin and Abaye were journeying together, okay? Or we're going to the same place, let's say. And at this time, Abaye is older and more prominent, right? So in the world of Torah scholars, generally, we're certainly going to say that a teacher is more prominent than his student, right? So, and particularly an elder, right? An elder is always going to be more prominent, or almost always, is going to be more prominent than a young person. So, Abaye is the elder here, and he and Ravin are going to the same place, and they are riding their donkeys. So let us imagine that they're both going to attend a lecture by one of the great luminaries of the age. They're on their way. Abaye is the elder. They're both riding their donkeys in the same direction. Ravin is first, right? So let's say he notices that, just the way the journey has unfolded, or the way that their commute has unfolded, that Abaye, who is his elder, is behind him. So the one in front, that's sort of a more respectable position when two are in line on the road somewhere. And so Abaye became knows that Ravin knows that the older one knows that the younger one is aware that he has an elder behind him, riding a donkey behind him, and doesn't do anything about it. And so Abaye doesn't like that, because where he's from, if a more senior, more prominent person is on the road and a younger one is ahead of him, so the younger one would move to the side and let the older one go first. And Abaye notices that Ravin doesn't let him do that, and so Abaye feels disrespected. When they reach their destination, let us say the synagogue, the place where the lecture is going to be given, Ravin reaches the door first, right? Let's say they tie up their donkeys and now they're going to go enter the hall. Ravin reaches the door first and he holds open the door. That didn't turn on. And Ravin says to Abaye, let the master enter first. And Abaye says, And was I not your master when we were on the road, right? Why did you not respect me when we were on the road and invite me to go first? And this isn't so much, you disrespected me, but it was also a question of, haven't you been taught that you should let your elder go first on the road? And Ravin's answer is, we were taught that we do not give way to prominence when we're on roads and bridges and in the matter of washing hands, right? And there are reasons for that. On a road, if we're always going to wait until the sort of more respectable person goes first, we can actually cause accidents. We might step in mud. We might, unduly delay a journey, and that could lead to trouble and robbers and highwaymen. And it's actually a matter of public policy among the sages, and Abayas just simply hadn't heard this ruling, that we do not defer to prominence on roads, on bridges, and the reason this teaching was brought in the matter of washing hands, meaning at the end of the meal, let's say, they ate with their hands and they've got their hands are, kind of ooky, and before doing the final hand washing, so that they would say the grace after meal, you don't wait until the most prominent person has washed his hands before you wash your hands. When you're ready to wash your hands, you wash your hands. However, when it comes to doorways, and this means any doorway that is worthy of a mezuzah, right? It doesn't have to actually have a mezuzah on it, but if it's a doorway that could have a mezuzah on it, so imagine the doorway to any building other than a door to a bathroom. Okay, so you could put a mezuzah on any doorway, the exterior doorway or the interior doorways, just not to a bathroom. So there, when we're both going to go into a door, so you let the more prominent person go first. And this strikes us, I hope it strikes most people as good manners. This is just, this is the way that we should conduct ourselves. And we should let a more prominent person pass through a doorway first. And if that doesn't strike one as the correct way to do it, so revise your manners. That is the way that we should do things still today. However, a good takeaway from this little story, right, is that Ravin did not mean any disrespect to Abaye by not letting him go first when they were on the road. Abaye felt disrespected and then learned that there was, a ruling that he had been unaware of. And I think we should remember that sometimes in this world, we get slighted, we take offense, and we feel that we've been disrespected. And really what's going on is that the person, has something else going on. Maybe they're actually being polite according to the way that they were educated. Maybe they heard something that we didn't. Maybe there's a cultural difference, between somebody from a different generation or from a different country or from a different background. Whatever it is, it's not personal, right? And whenever we feel, that we've been disrespected, we should take a pause and say, is it really personal? Or is it just some kind of a difference that I'm unaware of? And that's what's really going on. We move on in this matter of prominence and sort of manners at a gathering. Rav Yehuda ben Rav Shmuel bar Shelat says in the name of Rav that when we have a communal meal and one person, it should be the host, as we've learned, is going to break bread for everybody. But if, for example, we're not at someone's house, but it's a communal meal, in a public building. Okay, so then let's say the most prominent person gets assigned to make the hamotzi, the bread blessing on behalf of everybody, and everyone's going to answer amen. So until that person has eaten, nobody else eats. At a Shabbos dinner, this is kind of like, it's just obvious that this is what happens because he breaks bread for everybody, and then the bread gets passed around. And you're not going to get your bread until he's eaten. This is key, though. Sometimes we feel like I'm making the blessing, and I don't want to people don't like to eat and then pass, right? People want to be polite and just pass and then eat themselves. But if you're the one making the blessing, you need to eat and then hand out the bread, and they'll know that they're not going to be able to eat anything else until they eat the piece of bread that they've been passed. But there may be a situation where somebody's making a blessing over bread, and rather than passing out bread, you have your own piece of bread in front of you, and you're going to answer Amen, and that's going to be the blessing for the piece of bread that's already in front of you, so you can't eat it until he's eaten his. That's the key there. You don't eat until the one who made the blessing has eaten. And the one who made the blessing on behalf of everybody, he can't eat his piece of bread until the majority answer Amen. This is a teaching of Rav Chisda, right? So Rav Chisda says, he, the one making the blessing, has to wait for people to say Amen, but he's not required to wait until everybody says Amen, because some people may unreasonably, delay. They might not be paying attention. They might space out, and then everyone in the room is waiting. But he has to wait until the majority of the people in the room say Amen to his blessing. Then he can eat, and then the rest of us who are waiting for him to eat, now we can eat. Got it? Yeah. Rav and Shmuel were having a meal. So we have another incident. Rav and Shmuel were dining together. They were having a good time. They had a great conversation. They finished eating, but they were still talking, and they had not recited the grace after the meal yet. Rav Shimi arrived late. He joined them, but arrived after they had finished eating. And he started to rush his eating so that he could join in their Zimmun. And then the question came up, since they've already eaten, can he eat so that he can join in their Zimmun, in their invitation to say the grace, which we said requires at least three Jewish men in order to have a Zimmun, in order to recite that first part of the grace after meals, which is the invitation to bless out loud, right? And the answer is, it's interesting, he can join their Zimmun as long as they feel that they could eat a little more. If they're absolutely done and there's no way they would eat more, so then their meal is done, and so he came so late, and even though he eats at the same table with them, he's not sharing a meal with them, so they can't combine to do the Zimmun. But if they don't even have to eat, but if they feel that they could eat more, then it's like they're still in their meal mode, as it were, and therefore now the one who came late can eat. Maybe he's going to eat a little bit efficiently, a little bit quickly, so he doesn't keep them waiting too long. But then when he's finished with his meal, they can join together and they can make the Zimmun, the invitation to the grace. And this is a valuable teaching because generally speaking, we learned, was it yesterday or the day before, that the one who recites the grace after the meal at a hosted meal, right? So we all went to someone's house. That was the host. He gave us a whole meal. The host breaks bread for the blessing before the meal. One of the guests leads the grace after the meal. Why? So that in the grace after the meal, he can make a blessing on the host, right? We want to bless the host who provided all this hospitality and food for us. Which of the guests is going to lead the grace after the meal? Answer, the most prominent, right? We want the most prominent guest to lead the grace after the meal. And so the question comes up, well, what if the most prominent one is the one who came late, right? So we know that he's not going to be able to, recite the grace unless, well, that's for the Zimmun. I'm actually not sure. Maybe he can come late and even not, he has to eat something so that he can say the grace after the meal. So even if everybody's done, but we haven't benched yet, even if they're totally done and there was no chance that they were going to eat some more, but this guy who came late now has his meal. But the fact is, if he's the most prominent, he can lead the grace after the meals. Now we have a question that came up in our Mishnah, which is what all this commentary has been discussing the Mishnah. And the Mishnah was who qualifies to join in the Zimmun, in the invitation to the grace. And so there was a discussion that, who can be part of that. So for example, a non-Jew cannot be part of the Zimmun, right? The invitation to recite the grace. You need 3 male Jews for that. 3 Jewish females can make a Zimmun. They're not obligated. 3 Jewish males are obligated to do this. But let's say that there's 2 of them and a non-Jew. So they don't combine to make 3 for the purposes of the Zimmun. Likewise, a slave only counts in certain situations and not others, and mostly not. But then they ask, well, what about somebody who just doesn't know the law, right? Somebody who is an Am Haaretz, right? So he's a Jew, but he's lacking completely in the qualities that would make one not just learned, but a mensch, right? So the word Am Haaretz literally means nation of the land or people of the land, but it's a euphemism that basically means an ignoramus. But now we have to define what is an ignoramus, right? Such that even though this person is born a Jew, it's going to disqualify him from joining in the Zimmun. Now, I want to note right at the outset that this idea that an Am Haaretz cannot join in the Zimmun no longer applies. This applied in ancient times, particularly in the company of Torah scholars, where they wanted that blessing to have a certain significance and gravitas. But at some point later, this decree was repealed. Why? Because they didn't want divisiveness among the Jewish people. And so even if there was a Jew who was born Jewish, but has completely become disassociated from Judaism and Jewish learning and everything, and so could be termed an Am Haaretz, still we can make a Zimmun with that person to promote unity among Jews. So that's a change that was made later. Nevertheless, the discussion of the qualifications or the requirements or the disqualifications that pertain to somebody being deemed an Am Haaretz, that actually will come up repeatedly in our journey through the Talmud, right? And I remember once I did an interview with Rav Steinsaltz, so the great, really incredible Torah scholar and commentator, who, is his name on this? With a commentary, here he is, by Rabbi Adon Evan Israel Steinsaltz, right? So that's Rav Steinsaltz. And I told him my story and how, I'm not going to go into it right now, but how I became the accidental Talmudist. And at that point, I really just knew almost nothing. And how I didn't know, when the fellow at the store said, "Are you doing Daf Yomi?" And I didn't know what he was asking me. I didn't know what Daf Yomi was. And I said to Rav Steinsaltz in telling the story that I felt like an idiot. And Rav Steinsaltz says, worse than an idiot, an ignoramus. Because an ignoramus for Jews is worse than an idiot, right? So an idiot is just somebody, who doesn't have a big mental capacity. An ignoramus, right? It's somebody who has the capacity to learn and has neglected to learn, right? So that is considered worse among the sages. At any rate, the term Am Haaretz, which we're loosely translating as an ignoramus, is not an easily defined term, and there's lots of possibilities for what it means. And here on our daf, page 47 in Tractate Berachos, so we're going to have a bunch of opinions of who is an ignoramus, right? So who is an ignoramus? One opinion is that it's a person who does not tithe, right? A person who doesn't set aside from the grain that he grows, especially a farmer, right? So a farmer grows grain and he's supposed to set parts of it aside for the priest, for the Levites, for the poor, etc. There's a whole bunch of rules of tithing. One who does not tithe could be characterized as an Am Haaretz. But the sages say an Am Haaretz is somebody who does not recite Shema twice a day. In other words, somebody who does not accept the yoke of heaven, somebody who does not submit to God by reciting the Shema twice a day, which is a biblical commandment, a Torah commandment. A Jew is commanded to recite the Shema twice a day. And a person who doesn't do that could be considered an Am Haaretz according to the sages. Rabbi Yehoshua says it's a Jewish man who does not wrap tefillin every day. Ben Azai says it's a Jewish man who doesn't wear tzitzis, right? Who doesn't have the fringes on his garment. Rabbi Natan says it's any Jew who does not have a mezuzah on his house, on the doorways of his house. Natan Bar Yosef says an Am Haaretz is somebody who does not arrange for his children to learn Torah. Right? Now you're starting to sense that this is a policy, right? They're making policy. Somebody could know a lot of Torah himself, could be a learned individual, but if he then starts to, for whatever reason, alienate himself from the community and from the community of Jewish learning and doesn't arrange for his children to learn, so according to Rabbi Natan Bar Yosef, that makes him an Am Haaretz. And then Acherim say, even a learned Jew, so a Jew who knows a lot and has studied a lot of Torah in his life, but he did it on his own and doesn't seek out Torah scholars to learn with and to learn from and to clarify that which he's learned on his own, is an Am Haaretz. Now, this is a very different definition than the sort of more commonly accepted notion that an Am Haaretz, really generally throughout the Talmud, the sort of general meaning of Am Haaretz is somebody who is devoid of spirituality, who does not have a profession or an occupation, who lacks education, who does not learn Torah, and does not do any mitzvahs. All those things have to apply, and that's what generally makes someone an Am Haaretz, right? So you can imagine it's basically a bum. The general notion is that an Am Haaretz is some kind of a bum. But here, this final definition from Acherim seems to suggest that this could be a very learned individual who has turned his back on Judaism and on Torah and on learning. Now, this is different than an apikoros, which is a heretic, right? A heretic is somebody who may have a lot of learning and then just out loud, denies that God exists or that the Torah is true or things like that. That's different. This is just somebody who doesn't come from a sort of philosophical, stance on rejecting Judaism for some reason that he made up, but rather just doesn't care, right? So according to Natan, to Natan Bar Yosef and Acherim, it could be a learned person, but who just doesn't care about Torah for himself and his family, and that's what would make him an Am Haaretz. And so in understanding what it is that the sages criticize, right, what would lead somebody to earn in their eyes this very negative label of Am Haaretz, we start to understand what their values are, right? When you see what people critique, you understand what they value. And here we understand what they value. And the final teaching that we have here on Daf 47 is from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. And he says that when we arrive for a prayer service early enough to be one of the first 10 who are there and make the quorum, the minyan, so then we receive a huge reward. And even if 100 people come later, we receive a reward that's equivalent to the reward of all of them put together, right? So that you're one of the first 10, you're the one who makes this prayer service happen, right? You make it a minyan, you make it possible for the others to pray. So then it's a vast spiritual reward, and your reward is equal to the reward of everybody who comes. And so from that, we also learn out that while we're required to pray 3 times a day, there is, and we get a reward for doing that. We get an extra reward for going and doing it with a minyan. Even if we're late and we're not the ones who make the minyan, we get a reward for davening in a group. And if we're one of the first 10, then we get a reward equivalent to the reward of everybody who shows up at that service, right? So go to shul, go to synagogue. It's a huge merit for you, for your family, for everybody. And of course, why is this such an important value? Because when people pray together, it promotes community, right? In order to have a place to go and join a minyan and be part of a service, so then you're part of a community and you get to know people. And God forbid, people have needs in the community. They fall on hard times. There's a death in the family. So that you're there for them, right? Judaism is very much, I think all religions would probably say they are also, and that's good. But very much Judaism is a religion that happens in community. It requires community whenever possible. And if you are a Jew who's interested in becoming more Jewish, and you live in a place where there's no other Jews, so it's a challenge. It's difficult. You can do a lot of learning online. This is a possibility that did not exist, even 20 years ago, let alone for the last 3,000 years. So that's a huge gain. But to really take advantage of community, think about living in a place where there's an actual physical flesh and blood community around you. It's important and valuable. I'm just going to quickly scroll through the comments to see if there's anything I need to address, but then I really got to run because I want to be part of this minyan and get there on time. I'm not seeing questions. I see a lot of comments from Timothy James Wheeler, so thank you for being here. And thank you to Tracy Smith for making a donation and becoming our partner in sharing Torah with the world. In the merit of that donation, may you and your loved ones have great meaning, joy, and prosperity and health. And I'm not being able to scroll further back. It's not letting me scroll. I'm sorry. I know one other person donated, and we are really grateful. Anybody who donates, you're our partner in sharing Torah with the world, and that's a big merit to you and to your family. Sending you all big love from LA.